Hey, welcome back to 65 Drums. My name's Justin. So here's a question for you. If you're a fan of ATV like me, maybe you have a couple of cymbals or a complete drum set, or hey, even if you've just played a drum set of theirs at a music store and you just liked the experience, can you tell me what they released this year? I feel like most people just straight up can't, and they probably couldn't tell you what ATV came out with, what new stuff they released last year, or the year before, or all the way back to 2020. Most people have no idea. So we're going to break down what ATV has released this year, what I saw that's brand new at NAMM, and then talk about where ATV is currently at as a company, and whether or not they're still worth getting excited about. That's coming up. But first, today's video is brought to you by EdrumCenter.com. If you're in the market for a new drum set, a new part like a cymbal, a drum module, a used drum set, you got to go check out EdrumCenter. There's a discount link in the description of this video. Go use that to save some money on your next order and get something fun for your setup. Okay, so let's start with what they've released so far this year. When I went to the NAMM convention, I got a chance to see some new hardware they came out with. There's a new hi-hat stand and a new kick drum pedal. Very basic stuff. It's like beginner or maybe right below middle range, so it's not going to beat a DW5000 or an Iron Cobra range, but it's solid hardware. The kick drum pedal has a very sturdy feel to it while also being very fluid at the same time. It's also nice that you don't have to reach underneath the pedal board in order to tighten it down to the kick drum pad. The only weird thing is that it seems to have these felt beaters on it, and with electronic drums, that's a no-go, so you kind of have to use the kick drum patch with these pedals. Meanwhile, the hi-hat stand is yet another double-braced hi-hat stand, nothing really crazy going on. The second update is that now ATV is selling a secondary line of mesh heads. These are co-branded ATV and ASPR mesh heads. Now, I don't know if I'm supposed to pronounce that as ASPR or Asper, like sound it out as a name, but I'm just going to go with spelling it for the sake of this video. Usually what you see with one ply is that the companies take an extreme approach on either end of the spectrum. They'll go really, really thin and bouncy and not really have that much durability, like a Rima Silent Stroke. Or they'll go to the opposite extreme, like a Go Edrum or a DrumTech Pro mesh head, where it's very, very thick, and so that makes it feel very acoustic-like, but the trade-off is that they end up being very, very loud. So I was kind of surprised to see these ASPR mesh heads go right down the middle. Similar levels of rebound and similar levels of noise of a 2-ply mesh head, and they're also slightly transparent, and they kind of look like Gen 1 Evans sound-off heads. So after playing both of these mesh heads side by side against each other, my personal preference goes towards these new ones. I think they're great. Now, it's not a massive difference. I'm not going to say that your life is going to be changed if you buy these mesh heads, but I do prefer the experience. Oddly enough, they sound a little bit nicer than the standard ATV mesh heads. Because 2-ply mesh heads, we all know what they sound like. It's like this rough, sort of buzzing, sort of raspy tone, because the two layers are rubbing against each other, producing that sound. The only things that I don't really like about these mesh heads is that I prefer to have a solid color for my mesh heads. I don't like the semi-transparency of seeing the guts of electronic drums. And secondly, I do prefer white mesh heads over black mesh heads. When you got these black shells, a solid white finish on the top gives a nice contrast. The two colors go together really well. So I did a poll on the YouTube community tab, and it looks like you guys like white mesh heads for the majority of people, followed by black mesh heads that were a solid color, and then white semi-transparent, and then black semi-transparent. Now you might be wondering, who in the world is this ASPR brand? I like to think that I keep on top of electronic drum news and stuff, but I've never heard of them. Turns out they're sold by a drumhead company based in Japan. They sell every kind of acoustic drumhead I can think of, even like goat skin leather drumheads. And their mesh heads are part of the Boom series, which hit stores in December of 2020. If you buy them co-branded as ATV heads, the prices range from $50 to $80, and they're only selling them in 3 different size variants, 10, 13, and 18. So they're really intending this as a secondary drumhead option for pre-existing ATV customers. But if they sold the rest of the ASPR catalog, they could also cater towards, guys that already have a conversion set up and they just like the feel of these mesh heads. All right, so that's about as long as I can talk about 3 new mesh heads, a stand, a pedal, and then I guess the drum throne as well. We need to address the elephant in the room. ATV has been very boring not only this year, but they didn't really release anything of substance the year before, or the year before. And this is not normal. Let's take a look at ATV's timeline. I threw together the dates that they announced their different products. In 2015, they announced the 85 drum module, made to work with anything, and they're still selling it to this day. 2016, they announced the ATV A-frame. This is a very expensive hand percussion pad, but it's one of the most unique ones you'll ever play. And then in 2017, they announced the Edrum's Artist Series, which of course back then was a big deal. Then in 2018, they announced a bunch of new cymbals. They come out with 3, including a very large China cymbal. And then they announced one that will hit the next year that was like an ozone style crash. 2019 is their busiest year by far. They announced the EXS 1 and 2 Mark II. You'll probably never play those because they're meant for the Asian market. They never came to the Americas, and I don't think they hit Europe either. And then they also had the global release of the EXS 3 and 5. On top of these concrete releases, they also had future announcements they showed off in 2019 at the NAMM convention. So they showed off the ATV Artist Pro, EXP, and STD. Don't ask me why they named it that way. And then the ATV ADIO expansion box that finally used up that little expansion port on the back of the 85 module. It was kind of trying to do what the Pearl ePro Live was trying to do, be acoustic and electronic at the same time, sound good in either configuration. In addition, apparently ATV USA was working with a third-party website that would allow you to buy ATV A drums and then have whatever shell wrap you want on those drums. The only problem is everything I just mentioned, none of that saw the light of day. It all got canceled. In 2020, the only new thing that came out was sounds from Canopus on their online sound store, and I think a kit builder for the EXS line. And then in 2021, they come out with the EXS3CY, which was the 3, but with a second crash. And then in 2022, they released the EXS5SK, which is the 5, but with the better kick drum and snare drum from the A-drums line. And then this year, we already talked about that. It's really easy to see that the problems all seem to come to a head in 2020. This is when a bunch of tariffs hit the United States, so anything coming in from China, all of a sudden it got a lot more expensive. It ate away at the margin that ATV USA was using to survive and make a profit, so they go bankrupt. And then for some reason, ATV Australia goes under at about the same time. And then ATV Japan, they didn't get away unscathed because some of their engineers walk from the company. They go to the factory that makes ATV drums, and then with the help of the factory, they create the F-Note brand of electronic drums. And again, this all comes down to tariffs and interpersonal conflict, business type things. And of course, you probably don't care about business type things that go on behind the scenes of drum companies. But the fact of the matter is, any behind the scenes stuff that results in less products and no new releases, that's something that we'll inevitably take notice of. So the end result is that from 2020 to 2023 so far, and we're only halfway through the year, but until this point, we have not seen an actual brand new component. And again, I'm not saying that ATV should revamp every drum set every single year because that's impossible. But what they do need to do is leapfrog around. One year they have a new version of the flagship. The next year they have a multi-pad. The next year they have new cymbals. The next year they change up the color. They got shell wrap options. Like do something like that where every year something substantial is happening. Now we can give them a grace period for the first year. 2020 was a rough financial year. And then 2021, they did get a new distributor in the United States, which is EdrumCenter. But after taking 2 years off of not releasing any new components, they should have started announcing new things by maybe the end of 2022 at the latest, and then going into 2023, this is where I start to raise my eyebrows, because by now, they should have something in the works, something to announce, just to show that the fans should remain excited about them. New products are the oxygen that the fans use to talk about their favorite brand, and if nothing new is coming out, they have no reason to be excited. And the funny thing is, there's a bit of democracy to this treadmill of new products every company has to release. Because you would assume that maybe just the small companies and the mid-tier companies have to release stuff. They have to stay lean. They got to stay hungry. They're the ones that have to work hard. But actually, that's not really the case. Every company, big and small, has to release new stuff all the time. Let me give you 2 examples. On the one hand, we have Roland. They've never gotten off the treadmill. From like the late 90s all the way to current day, they barely take off a year. They may not make substantial things happen every single year, but there's always something new coming out. And then on the other hand, you have their traditional rival, which is Yamaha. They jumped off the treadmill for a little bit and it hurt them. Like they had 4 flagships in 9 years. That is incredible. And that's when they decide, we're not going to release a new flagship to replace this for 10 years. We're going from 4 flagships in 10 years to 1 flagship 10 years from now. Am I oversimplifying the story to make a point? Yeah, probably. There's a lot of factors that go into Yamaha having to claw back the momentum they used to have in the 2010s. What I'm saying is, Yamaha waited a little bit too long to refresh their flagships. That's the main point. But the good news is, as long as you've made solid products in the past and maybe you've just taken way too long to release the next generation, as long as you come out with something good again, you've got people waiting on the sidelines that will at least give you the benefit of the doubt to go drive to a music store and try out the drum set to see if it's good. So if I was ATV, the first thing I would do is make sure I've got all the people in place, the engineers, the people that record samples, so I'm ready to start working on the A-drums too. The next thing that I would do is figure out how I'm going to be different than the Roland VAD line and the new F-Note drum sets. Because F-Note is made in the same factory as ATV, designed by the people that originally helped work on the original A-drums and all that stuff. So you have to figure out how you're going to be unique. It's not 2017 anymore. You have to evolve into something a little bit better. The next step is to tell your fans that you're working on something new. Even if it's something simple, like we're 20 months away from releasing a module. We're going to release a new shell color in the next 6 months. We're working on a new ride cymbal that has a more sensitive bell zone. Something like that. Keep your fans informed, give them little teaser behind the scenes, photos of like stuff you're working on, or do some interviews. Just do something to involve the fans and let them know they're valued and that you have cool stuff that's worth waiting for. Also, the ATV 85 module has got to go. It costs way too much money and it was announced back in 2015. It's super old. They need to go over to the 86 or the 87, whatever they're going to call it. And if they do make a new module, it can't just be an 85 in disguise with a faster processor and a slightly different looking shell. I know they love their microtransactions on their website, but they gotta include more than 5 to 12 kits depending on which era of the 85 we're talking about. It needs to have a good selection of drum sounds, a bunch of different genres. It needs to have some non-drum set sounds, like the cowbell sounds need to be in there. It's gotta have some 808s, just the basics need to be in place. They also need to have the industry standard level of editing that all modules have. I'm talking EQ, compression, reverb, transient controls, and tuning. One-shot sample import is also a must. I realize that ATV doesn't like one-shot sample import, something about controlling their brand image. And what if somebody downloads a crummy snare sample from online and then people think that ATV drum modules sound bad because they saw it on a Twitch stream? I get that, but really that's being a little bit controlling. They need to allow people to bring in samples. And then, of course, you need to be able to layer sounds in order for that to work. We love stacking kick drums. We love layering snare drums. We need to be able to layer sounds. And by now, everything should have Bluetooth. I don't understand how an expensive drum module can omit this as a feature when I can find it on $40 MP3 players on Amazon. But aside from that drum module rant, really the point of this video isn't for me to complain and tell them that they have to do this and they have to do that. It's up to them as a company to decide the direction they want to go. I'm also not implying or saying that everything they currently make is out of date. They still have plenty of products in their lineup that are worth buying right now. But what I am trying to say is that they've coasted for longer than they should on previous successes. The exact number of years you can get away with this is up for debate. Is it 3 years? Is it 5 years? Is it 8 years? I don't know. People can debate that in the comments. But it's coming, so they better get moving. That's my 2 cents. Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments below. Have an awesome day, and I'll see you in the next one.